Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. A very warm welcome to everyone. Let us begin with a small prayer. Sarvatma sarvadrugyosau sarvadhyasa nirasakrit satatam sannidhattam me hridaye paramashivah. I welcome you all to session 3 of Gita for the Effective Manager by L. Ramaswamy ji. Yesterday and today, Ramaswamy ji has been speaking about self-management lessons from Bhagavad Gita. Yesterday, he quoted very beautifully that how we should invest in our intellect more rather than anything else. Today, he will be continuing again. Ramaswamy ji, please start your session.
ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् Hari Om all. The topic for the day is Secret of Success. As we mentioned yesterday, Bhagavad Gita is a text which is directly taking us to the ultimate state of liberation. Sorry, just a minute. So, as we said, Bhagavad Gita is a text that is exposing us to the highest state of self realization. But from time to time, Gita has been investigated and made useful for people at a particular time for a particular cause which may be limited in its end in this world. So, that is in no way we should condemn it, because there are essentially two types of people. Bhagavad Gita even says that in chapter 3, he says, Lokesmin Dvivida Nishta. There are two types of paths that are being prescribed from time immemorial, because there are essentially two types of people. Two types of people are those who are introverted and those who are extroverted. Those who are in the path of renunciation and those who are in the path of action. Those who are in pravritti and those who are in nivritti, they say. And those who are in nivritti are quite few in number. And blessed are those people who are introverted, who are absorbing knowledge and who can do sadhana which is for them at the internal level and then go towards liberation. Majority of the people are turned towards the world and they are active in nature. They need to do a lot of action. So therefore, the prescription of karma yoga for them, which is the path of action, is elaborate in Gita. Now we also have to remember that Bhagavad Gita is given on the battlefield where the Shrota or the student there is Arjuna, the Adhikari for the knowledge there is Arjuna, who is essentially a man of action. And he has come to a situation where he is emotionally overwhelmed and he is telling that he will not do action. He wants to run away from his action, which is fighting the war. It is in this context that Gita as a lecture is delivered to Arjuna. So the Adhikari there is Arjuna, Even when there are probably other Gitas like what Krishna tells Uddhava and various other Gita is there, why is Bhagavad Gita sort of most famous is probably that the Adhikari there is a close representative of majority of humanity. So Arjuna represents all of us. All of us are there in this world wanting to do action in the world. Our pent up energies are there, desires are there. So we are turned out into the world. When you are turned out into the world, how you must do action and how must you convert the action into worship is a very important message. And therefore, probably there is no other manual close to Gita when it comes to expounding Karma Yoga also. And it is very, very elaborately given. If you go to the Upanishad, Ishavasya Upanishad covers the whole karma as it were in one verse, and that too he is talking about the highest level of Nishkamya karma. If you cannot meditate, then do this, is the prescription given there. Kurvanneveha karmani jiji vishay chatagum samaha. Evam tvai nanyate tosti na karma lipyate nare. Finished. Now here you have 43 verses of Karma Yoga, and in the fourth chapter also he extends that. Like that, a elaborate prescription is given, methodology is given, step by step methods are given. So therefore, it is clear that our scriptures are not just meant for the highest grade of seekers, and particularly like a text like Gita, it caters to all levels of seekers. So therefore, if a person is wanting to go out into the world, he is desirous of various things that he want to achieve in the world, be it success, be it any other thing in the world also, there is a way or method by which he has to do it, and that is also prescribed nicely. So in other words, the same message can be derived by us at various levels also, and that is where this topic fits in beautifully. It is a very clearly, Bhagavad Gita can be taken to, if you say corporate, this is a very ideal topic also for that. Everybody in this world wants success. There is nobody who does not want success. If you ask them what is success, that may the definition may define or be different from person to person. But you cannot deny that each and everybody wants success in some form or the other. Now, first of all, we need to understand what is exactly success. First, let there be an understanding of success. Now, if you ask any person what is success, he will define success according to his level of achieving something, isn't it? Suppose you ask a person, are you successful? Somebody will say, yes, I am. Or somebody will say, no, somewhat, but I need to achieve a lot more. Somebody will say, no, 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 I am not successful. Suppose I ask you, then can you tell me some people who are all successful? You may say Rajnikant is successful as far as cinema world is concerned. Amitabh Bachchan, Kamal Hassan, Chiranjeevi. These are all successful people in films. Sachin Tendulkar, Virat Kohli, Brian Lara, Rahul Dravid. These are all successful people in cricket. Narendra Modi, Amit Shah, various other people, they can say in various parties also, Trump, they may all be successful. What? In their political field. So, if you ask these people, then why do you consider them successful? You say, why do should not be considered them successful? They have shown their success by achieving something. He has scored so many number of runs. He has represented India in so many matches. He has acted in so many films or directed so many films, out of which so much are box office films, hit films. So therefore, you will be able to understand what success is with reference to what you can consider as achievement. Suppose if I say, I have a neighbor and according to me, he is successful. Oh, is it? How do you say so? He meticulously gets up early in the morning, uh, studies for some time, does his yoga, goes for the morning walk, 8:30 sharp at the dining table, 9:30 is sharp at the office. He does his job very nicely. Evening he comes back home. He spends time with children, and then he watches some TV, has dinner and goes to bed by 9:30 sharp. And then next morning, meticulously, his disciplined way, he is following the schedule. He'll say, yes, sir. So, I mean, we do respect his discipline, but why do you consider him successful? What did he achieve? That will be the question. Okay, he's a good person, he's an honest person, he maintains discipline in his life, all that is fine. But what did he really achieve to be called a successful person? So success is measured always in terms of achievement. Whatever be the achievement at your level, whatever you consider as success, but there has to be some achievement externally in the world for you to be called successful. I asked this question to even many Bengalis here. When we think of Bengal, each and every person knows the greatness of Swami. Okay, they may not call Swami here, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, Thakur Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, they say. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa has been a very pivotal figure, and towards the end of his life, he inspired and produced various young monks who were stalwarts. And if I ask who of them you know and who is the famous of them, everybody, not only in Bengal, everybody will say Swami Vivekananda. Isn't he great? Yes, he is great. He is a very, very successful person. I mean, why? Of course, he went to America, he propagated, he took Hinduism there and spread everywhere. He had so many number of followers, he gave so many number of speeches, and maybe he visited so many places. He built the Ramakrishna mission, he visualized that. So many things that you can say within the short span of life that he had in his achievement thing. So obviously, he is very, very successful. We are not to judge Swami Vivekananda. I'm just saying, if you consider him in his field, he is a very successful person. But then you ask, can you name the other Swamis and other sannyasins who were disciple of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who maybe also have internally reached that same state or the highest state of Brahman also? We really do not know. But hardly people are able to take any other names. Swami Vivekananda, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and Swami Vivekananda, these are the names that is sort of stuck in our mind. Not that others are any less in their glory, but we don't even know their names. Why? Swami Sharadananda, Swami Ramakrishnananda, Swami Brahmananda, Swami Turiyananda, like that, so many other people were also there, and some have even traveled abroad and things. So we say we have all the respect for those Swamis also, sir, but with reference to achievement, what did they do? This is what you may even ask, or rather, what you will do is, I know these things about Swami Vivekananda. If you tell me what all they did, it will be useful. Like that, you will say. So, in other words, irrespective of whatever is your internal stature, evolution, and the status that you have achieved, which is what is important, the success is always measured in terms of what you achieve in the external world. And the degree of success is always understood when you compare one with the other. Who is more successful, Amitabh Bachchan or Dharmendra? Suppose if you say, then you have to compare the number of films he acted and number of films he acted, number of hit films of Amitabh Bachchan or Dharmendra, and say he is more successful, or the longevity of the actors, or whatever be it. There is a comparison. Who is more successful, Tendulkar or Brian Lara? Again, you can compare. You can compare the statistics, you can compare various other factors and say that this person is more successful, this person is less successful. Compare it comparatively. Exactly like that only when I ask, are you successful? You immediately compare yourself with somebody, maybe your cousin who is earning much more than you. Or maybe you are comparing with your boss. Maybe you are comparing with your brother. And then you say, I am more successful, or I am less successful, or I am not as much successful. So, our understanding of success is with reference to an achievement in the world, and understanding the degree of success is always with reference to comparison. Now, this achievement of something in the world will vary from person to person. If you ask what is success according to you, some may say, I just want to win this municipal councillor election and become the councillor of my ward. That is great achievement for me. That is great success for me. But for somebody else, it could be becoming a prime minister. A municipality doesn't come into his radar at all. Or for somebody, if you ask me, I have to sell 500 books of Swamiji, that I consider as success. Or I need to take 10 classes a week, if that is that. Or if I'm able to convey the message to 1,000 people, then it is success for me. Something like that. I need to have some measurement of success which is peculiar to me. It may not be a general formula that everybody can apply. Somebody may say, if I earn ₹1,000,000, that is great success. For somebody, million is nothing. They may say, I need to make ₹1,000,000,000,000. Then only it is successful. I want to enter just the Ranji team of my state. Then it's a great achievement, great success. No, I have to achieve the national team. But for somebody, it could be just a club team. So according to each person, whatever he visualizes, that achievement is measured as success for him, and that achievement definitely will vary from person to person. Okay, so there are two aspects of success here. One is the external achievement. External achievement will definitely vary from person to person, but there is another aspect of success which is internal. And in internal, oh, we have put comparison here. Internal is actually satisfaction. Forget this word comparison here, it comes from the previous slide. Internal is measured by your happiness or satisfaction. Just a minute. Yeah, you say external is achievement and internal is, you can call it satisfaction, happiness, joy, whatever you may call it. So what it means is, there is an external achievement for us which is linked to our internal satisfaction. If I make ₹1,000,000, I'll be happy. So your success is complete as far as you are concerned. Your point of view is concerned is that you are able to achieve something externally based on which you get that internal satisfaction also. If I'm able to become the prime minister, I'm happy. If I'm able to sell that books, 100, 500 books, I'm happy. So the external achievement may be different for different people, but the internal achievement, which is satisfaction, which is contentment, which is joy, which is happiness, that is common for all. Now, what Vedanta says here is, do not link your internal satisfaction with external achievement. This is the crux. All of us say that if I achieve that, I'll be happy. If I get ₹1,000,000, I'll be happy. If I'm able to fly an aeroplane, I'll be happy. Whatever it is, whatever I consider as success, that achievement is kept first, and based on that achievement, my mental state of happiness or satisfaction is linked to it. Vedanta says you have to de-link these two. Rather, you need to focus on your internal happiness or internal satisfaction. And if you are given a formula by which you are able to achieve that, then Vedanta says that your external achievement in the world becomes easier. So Vedanta is not against external achievement. In fact, you can go all out and achieve whatever you want to achieve and much more also. In fact, there must be a paradigm shift in your thinking, and your achievement must be much, much higher than what you are capable of. To that extent, you must go. But do not put the cart before the horse. You work on the internal achievement, internal satisfaction, joy independently. With that state of mind, if you are going to employ yourself in achieving whatever you want to achieve in the external world, that becomes more practical and that becomes more easy. There is a famous saint, Tyagaraja, who composed various kritis on Lord Rama. He lived about 2 centuries back, two to 3 centuries back in South India. In one of the kritis, he says, Shantamu leta saukyamu ledu. Shantamu leda, Shanta means peace, peace. Shanti means peace. Leda means if you don't have. If you don't have. Saukyamu. Saukyam means prosperity. Here you can extend it to mean all sorts of material success and everything. Ledu. It is not there. So, in other words, if you do not have internal peace, then there is no chance of achieving material prosperity. Or put it this way, even if there is material prosperity, if you are lacking inner peace, you will not be able to relish it and enjoy it. So for all practical purpose, it is not there with you. So the real success has to be measured in terms of both these things. There is external achievement and there is internal satisfaction. But the formula for achieving that is work on the internal satisfaction, happiness, joy, independent of the external achievement. With that state of mind, when you want to achieve whatever you want to achieve in the world, that becomes easier. And what is that internal satisfaction? It is to keep your mind under control with the help of intellect, which is the essence of self-management, which I am not going into detail now, but that is the formula. If you are able to keep the mind under control and if you are able to achieve that self-management within you, it is a relative term. To that extent, if you are able to find peace and happiness within you, with that state of mind, if you go all out into the world and you want to achieve whatever you want to achieve, you will be able to achieve it much more easily and effortlessly than others. So, this is something that we need to understand for all those who are pursuing success. Okay, but and everybody in their own form, consciously or unconsciously, you are wanting success. Somebody may say, sir, I'm not interested in a little bit of money. If I get, it's okay. My family life, it's okay. I want to be happy and this thing with children, and there's no fight and quarrel, and little bit of puja I do, but that is what is the achievement that you call a success for yourself. So unconsciously, you are seeking it. And you cannot just say it is just only the peace of mind. I want to meditate, close my eyes, and nothing outside me happens. I'm bothered about. I'm just for this only. Then you are probably in a higher state of evolution where nothing else. You are sort of in a transcendental thing. If you really claim to be like that, but that doesn't happen like that. And not only that, history has also shown who have achieved everlasting success, whose achievements have benefited the world over a period of time, much after their passing away also, are those people who have internally worked on themselves first. If you are able to achieve that perfection within you, and their contribution to the world, if you see, is immeasurable. It is immeasurable. It can stand even thousands of years. Otherwise, our achievement will be so limited that even within your lifetime, your statue will be brought down. Like that it is. So you need to work on your internal joy and satisfaction, which is the main thing. And external achievement is definitely not a taboo. In fact, things will happen through you and you will be able to achieve much more. You must, in fact. There's no compromise on that. So these are the two aspects of success. And then, what exactly is success? If we want to give, based on what we mentioned about achievement, if you want to have one word for success in terms of its nature, we can say success is an effect. Because success belongs to future, isn't it? Examine all the statements that many people make that they want to achieve something. It is that I have not achieved now that I want to achieve in future. I want to become the prime minister means I am not the prime minister now. I want to achieve in future. I want to sell 500 books. I want to earn so much money. I want to become the leader of this group. I want to build a building. That is success for me. That means building is not there now. Therefore, any form of achievement that you yourself define as success for you belongs to future. And future is always an effect. Future is a product of something that is going to happen now. And effect always has a cause. because the whole world functions on the basis of cause and effect. We may little bit deviate from here and try to understand this cause and effect a little. Most of the people may think in terms of whatever said and done, sir. You need luck. Then only you can shine brightly. The success will come to one person who is lucky. It must be written in his forehead. It must God must give success. Otherwise, you can do whatever you want to do. It is not guaranteed. It is so they attribute it to factors like luck, and also sometimes failure is bad luck. Um, See, there is a word for luck in Indian language. Sometimes they use the word bhagya. Bhagya is more to do with fate. In Bengal, they use this term bhagya. I think in Urdu, they use the term kismat. But in Tamil also, we use the term, which is not a Tamil word, it is Sanskrit word. We use the term adrishtam. Adrishtam is a term that we use for luck. Suppose if a person gets a lottery, you say, oh, adrishtam. Adrishtam means he is lucky that day. If a lakh of rupees has come to him, eh, that's luck. And 1 lakh of rupees goes away from your purse. Bad luck, accident, something bad luck that you say. Suddenly, when he was standing in the corner of the road and a car came and hit him where it's not supposed to come at all, bad luck, accident. Suddenly, you fell from a building and you escape unhurt. Oh, good luck, luck. So we attribute these things to luck, and it is not wrong. We use the term adrishta. Imagine if you are working in a company for 30 days and at the end of 30 days you get salary and you give that salary to your mother or wife. If she doesn't say, hey, you are so lucky today, you have got 20,000 rupees or 50,000 rupees. No, what do you mean? Lucky. I worked for 30 days, they have given me this. What is the big deal about it? But one day you get a lottery and you give that 50,000 rupees. That day she says, wow, you are lucky today. Correct. So here, what is the thing that needs to be seen here? The work for 30 days is seen. That is the cause. Salary is the effect. So effect of salary is definitely seen. It is there in your hands. The cause for that, which is the work for 30 days, is also seen. You have worked, everybody has seen, and the company has also seen, and that is why they are giving you the salary. So the effect is seen, the cause is seen. That is called as cause and effect, right? Now here, in the second case, the lottery 1 lakh rupees that you have got, that is the effect, that is seen. But what is the cause? We do not know. Cause is not seen. Cause is not seen means it is termed as adrishtam. Drishtam in Sanskrit means seen. What is seen is drishtam. In Sanskrit mostly refers to the opposite. Vidya, avidya, karma, akarma. Like that, drishtam, adrishtam. Adrishtam means not seen. What is not seen is the cause is not seen. Cause is not seen does not mean that the cause is not there. Cause is there. Maybe you help many people and that is the effect that it is coming here. Similarly, if you rob away the money of many people from time to time and that comes as one big effect that your money also goes away. Something like that. This is according to the law of karma. Now you may say that this is just your postulation. Maybe you can say it's a postulation, but if you carefully look at the functioning of the universe, nothing in the universe functions apart from the law of cause and effect. You need to have a broadened vision to see this. If this cause and effect was not functioning, we will not call this universe as cosmos, it is chaos. And because of the functioning of cause and effect only, we are also inspired to study this, do effort, sadhana, improve in life. All this is there because of this functioning of this cause and effect only. If you can do anything and everything, but the result is not going to be totally in a different way, there's no connection at all, nobody will be inspired to do anything. And you do anything, nothing of the effect will. Why do you work so hard for money? Somebody else works, right? Take away his money. That's the easy formula. Now, why should there be rules, laws? Why should there be morality, ethics? Where is the root of all this coming from? Is that there is a perfect law that is functioning. And only when you understand this will you be able to align your life according to this. Now, coming back here, all of us want success. The whole world clamors for success. There is book after book, seminar after seminar on success. But see where the focus or tilt is. Everybody clamors for future. Rather, we must focus on what is the cause. If the cause is automatic, the effect has to be automatic. If there is a mango seed, mango tree has to come, coconut tree will not come. If you have a gold bar, that can only change into gold chain, iron chain will not come. If you have a wood can turn into furniture. So cause and effect are so much interrelated. So if you need success, which is an effect, both success and failure are effects, remember this. And the whole world is either worried about failure and euphoric about success and clamoring for success, but they are clamoring for something in the future. Vedanta brings back you and focuses your attention on the present. What must you do in the present so that success becomes automatic? You need not worry about success. Therefore, the question is, if success is an effect, what is the cause? The cause is nothing but right action. It is the action of today that transforms itself into success of tomorrow. If the action is to that extent deficient, it transforms itself into failure tomorrow. So Vedanta says, bring back your focus on action. The technique must be given as to how to act, how to execute proper actions. Once you do this, you need not worry about success. That is the beauty, actually. That is the formula. In fact, if you are able to understand this overall view, we should be inspired to learn the art of right action. That's it. So, what is success? Success is achievement, and achievement belongs to future, and future is an effect. If there is an effect, there has to be a cause. If success is an effect, what is the cause? The cause is right action. One who has put in the right action will not worry about success. All other people, you may, you know, they will break coconuts, they will keep their hall ticket in the temple, they will go rounds and rounds. I'm not against any of these practices of bhakti, please. But if you have not studied properly and do all these things, you think God will be falling for your this type of devotion? If a person is doing his work properly in the office, every time the boss comes in and goes out, he need not say good morning, sir, all the time. For his work, he will be automatically rewarded and promoted. A person who is not executing his work properly, he has to always say good morning, sir, every time the boss comes, hoping that he will be in the radar of whenever the boss wants to provide something for him. It is exactly like that. If you don't do your actions properly and then you go and pray and cry to God, you think that He is going to be, bestowing upon you which you don't deserve. It is not the case at all. Again, prayer has a role in this, bhakti has a role in this, but the direct cause for your success in the world is action. So you must focus and concentrate on doing the right type of action. Swamiji always quotes an incident in his college life about his dear friend named Ishwaran. When he was studying in Loyola College, he says in Chennai, there is this guy who always stood first in the class. His name is Ishwaran. He got 150 marks out of 100 in 4 subjects: mathematics, physics, chemistry, and French. Only in English, he used to get 75 marks, which is again the first mark in the class. But because they say, even if Shakespeare were to come and write on Shakespeare, they will give only that much marks. That is the maximum that you get in English. But otherwise, all other subjects where you can score fully, this person scores fully and he scores 150 out of 100. How is that possible? The question paper gives 15 questions and you have to answer any 10, and 10 into 10, 100 marks. But within 2 hours, Ishwaran answers all the 15 and he has the cheek to write, you can examine any 10. Like that it is. And such a person he just moves out of the examination center as quickly as possible. He's not bothered about anything else. And when the results are to be declared, Swamiji says other boys who are all very anxious about the result because one day before it might be put up in the university notice board, they go to see there. Then they say, Ishwaran, are you not coming? He says, tomorrow it will come in our college. What is the problem? It may be there in the paper. So don't bother about it, he'll say. And they go there and see Obviously, Ishwaran is there in the top of the list, and all others are searching for their names there. Just to pull his leg, they will come and say that your name is not there. Your name is not there in the successful persons list. You know what Ishwaran's answer would be? That it must be a printing mistake there. That is the confidence. This is not egoism or arrogance. A person who has done his action properly, studying and writing exams properly, why will he be bothered about result? It has to come to him. It is like that. A person who has focused and executed the right actions. Here, what we are talking about, right action or ideal action, is not the type of action that you do. See, here we are taking a class on Bhagavad Gita. Oh, it is a very holy action and right action. And somebody is doing only office job. No, that is a mediocre action, mundane action. And somebody is doing politics as their action. No, that is a very bad action. It is not talking about what action that you do. It is whatever action you do, if you want to make it successful, with what attitude and how you execute that action, that makes it a right action. In 2001, there was a terrorist attack in America where planes were flown into Twin Towers. If I ask you, is that a successful operation or not? Forget about the motive, forget about the terrorist aspect of that action, another thing. That they planned and executed something to that extent, it was a successful operation. We do not recommend such an action. We do not encourage such action. And those persons also, of course, they were dead, but they need to be, if they are caught, they must be punished. All that is fine. But even, again, I'm giving a wrong example. Even if you want to rob a bank, if you want that to be a successful operation, you need to execute the actions in the proper and right way to make that action successful. So therefore, right action is the method by which an action should be executed. What are the appendages surrounding that action that you need to focus on to make that as an ideal action, a right action? This makes this action automatically result in success. Now, what is interesting is, therefore, if the focus must be on action, there is a very famous statement that Swami Ramatirtha makes. These two statements actually we should think about for the rest of our lives. He says, your motto in life should be to strive, to struggle, not to succeed. A fantastic statement. The seminar is about success, okay, and whole world clamors for success. And here is a bold statement by Swami Ramatirtha, who says, your motto in life should be to strive, to struggle, not to succeed. Not to succeed does not mean that you quote failure. Not to succeed means your focus is on action. Your focus is on striving. Your focus is on struggling. If you are able to align your life in such a way that you are able to derive that happiness just being in the struggle, then you need not worry about the success at all. That itself is a reward and joy in itself. And obviously, for such an action, success is going to come. That is the right way of approaching it. In fact, Swami Chinmayananda puts it in another way. He says, keep your goal, keep your target so high that you must not be able to reach it. What does it mean that you must not be able to reach it? That means don't be satisfied by climbing a small hill near your house. You must target only nothing less than Mount Everest. That's all it means. So keep it so high so that you will be constantly on the struggle to achieve it. That, and then finally, when you achieve that, that is the real success. Till such point of time, you will be constantly in the struggle. You will not relax at any point of time. So he encourages for higher levels of success. That's all it means. So your motto in life must be to strive, to struggle, not to succeed. Again, another important statement Swami Ramatirtha makes is, the way to gain anything is to lose it. All of us clamor for success. He says, if you want success, you have to lose success. What does it mean? If a person, let us say, enters the tennis court and he tremendously is craving for success. I want to win this game. I want to win this game. Think about it. With what attitude does he enter the court then? That if I am craving in my mind that I want to win means at present I am not a winner. Therefore, psychologically, I think myself to be the loser. I enter the court as a loser and I will lose the game. Irrespective of my bank balance, if I'm craving for money, I want money, I want money, I want money all the time, I'm craving for money. What am I really thinking of myself? That I don't have money. I am putting myself in the position of a beggar. If I am putting myself in the position of the beggar, I will get pittance like beggar only. It is exactly like that. Rather, you enter the court as a winner without any worry or tension in your mind, you are sure to win. If you are able to understand this, then you will be able to understand the depth of the statement. The way to gain anything is to lose it. That person who holds the success in his mind all the time, pakado, 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 he is having that in his hold. He will never get it. On the other hand, a person who is relaxed, who is not holding it in his mind, chodo, if he has left it, for him, surely success has to visit. This is the law. 100 out of 100 times it will work. Even in even in uh, recent politics of Indian history, you can substantiate this. Rajiv Gandhi did not want to enter politics. He was happy flying planes. He was a pilot. When he did not want it, circumstances were there, obviously. He was pulled by everybody and put in the chair. 5 years later, after he has tasted power, he was very desperate to hold on to the chair. He lost it. Later, he lost his life also. Same thing happened to P.V. Narasimha Rao, who had retired from politics. He said, "Thank you, I played a good innings. Bye bye." When he had actually left everything and gone, he was pulled and put in the prime minister's chair. 5 years later, when he wanted it, he could not. He could not. When Vajpayee was in the first term, first it was 13 days, then it was 13 months. There was so much desperation to get that power. You will remember there was this tea party that happened in Poyas Garden with Jayalalitha, Subramaniam Swamy, and others. And once Vajpayee government had fallen, Sonia Gandhi claimed that she had 272 MPs and she was so desperate to get to the power. Obviously, it did not happen. Mulayam Singh and others, they thwarted it. But there was so much desperation that she did not get it. In 2004, whatever be the case, you can call it a false conscience, you can call it false renunciation, you can call it in any way. It can be true or false, I'm saying. But the fact is that she said, I don't want that chair. Whatever be the circumstance. The moment she said, I don't want that chair, everybody, even from the opposition and other parties, they're saying, you become please. They were all falling at the feet. This is how it works. We are not talking here politics, we are not talking. The point is, the moment you are desperate about something, the moment you are craving about something, it is 100% that it will not come. In fact, your thought forces are stopping it from coming to you. That is a separate subject altogether. We will not get into it, how the thought forces function. But the moment you are relaxed and you leave it as it is going to come to you. So you turn towards the sunlight and walk, the shadow will follow you. You try to chase the shadow, that means you are away from the sunlight and you chase it, you can never catch the shadow. It is like that. Worldly achievements, prosperity, everything is actually like a shadow that must follow you. And where must your focus must be? On the sunlight. Like that it is. If you are focused on the higher, the lower things will automatically get added up to you. So therefore, the way to gain anything at the lower level is to get yourself stuck onto something higher. So you are not focused on the higher, automatically it is going to come. In fact, achieving success in the world, the Gita says, is very easy. It's very easy. Krishna dismisses worldly achievements as Kshipram. Kankshanta karmanam siddhim yajanta iha devataha. Kshipram hi manushe loke siddhir bhavati karmaja. Kankshanta karmanam siddhim, if you desire success in this world, yajanta iha devataha, do the proper sacrifice to the gods and you will get like this. Kshipram means just like this. Kshipram hi manushe loke siddhir bhavati karmaja. Success is born of action in the world easily. The implied meaning in this verse is that being a human being, to achieve worldly success alone should not be your motto or goal. You are born You are born as human being to achieve greater things in life. And that is what you need to focus on. Along the way, material success and other things, let it come. It's okay. It's okay. You need not resist it. But you should be immensely satisfied and not be complacent till you achieve the greatest success, which is finding that perfection within yourself. And that is what is the real struggle. That is what must be your real aim. So, coming back here, the success is an effect. An effect belongs to future. Every effect has a cause, and the cause is action in the present. And the verse that we quoted here is what is written in Bhagavad Gita, a direct statement, Siddhir Bhavati Karmaja. Siddhi means success, Bhavati means is, comes out of it, becomes. Karmaja. Karmaja means that which is born of action. So success is that which is born of action. Bhagavad Gita, for those who want the reference, chapter 4, verse 12, immortal verse, it directly talks about success here. Now, we said success is an effect, and effect has a cause, and the cause is right action. Therefore, the next question arises, what is right action? As we said, we are not talking about morality and ethics of the action, but how is that action to be executed so that it becomes a proper action, an ideal action. An ideal action should automatically transform itself into success. And so we said yesterday that Swamiji addressed the Indian cricket team in 2001. That is the time he coined this term 3C success. The three components of success is the concentration, consistency, and cooperation. One is with reference to unit action. One is with reference to group of actions. One is with reference to attitude of action. We'll see as it comes along. So now we are focused on what is an ideal action. An ideal action has two components. One is that an ideal action generates energy. Generates energy means as you do that action, you feel enthused to do more of that action. As you do action, energy is generated. That is real action. Compare this with most of the actions that we do, we don't feel enthused about action. Action seems to tire us. Action seems to lead us to monotony and boredom. That is not right action. Right action should generate energy. And then you must also plug the holes by which there is avoiding dissipation of energy. If you want to fill a cistern or a big tank, there are three taps that are there. If you want to fill the tank, we say that the three taps must be open, only then it will be full. But you don't notice there are three holes also in the bottom. So we say both must happen. You must open the three taps and you must plug the three holes. Then it is a matter of time before the tank will be full. Exactly like that. If your action can be in such a way that it is able to generate energy, and you are plugging in the holes by which your energy is not dissipated, the energy that is generated is not dissipated into unproductive channels, then that action is a perfect action. It's a complete action. That should automatically result in success. Now, the first aspect is generation of energy. How do you generate energy? So you say, I want to generate energy. How should I do it? Then I ask you, what is that you have to generate energy? Obviously, we know that all of us have these three equipments. We have the body, we have the mind, we have the intellect. So we must employ all these three equipments to generate energy. How is it that the body generates energy? Body generates energy by being active, as simple as that. See, we are talking of Gita, we are talking of that highest philosophy of Tattvamasi and other thing, but the message comes down to the level that the body must be active. That's all it is. That is a very basic and fundamental lesson. The more you use your body, the more you energize yourself. Haven't you seen your right hand? If you are a right hander, why is right hand stronger than the left hand? Because you use right hand more. Why are athletes and film actors and all, they are able to perform a lot of times? Because their career involves a lot of activity and action that is there. The more you use the body, the more the body cooperates with you in the right way. In India, At least may not be now. Now there is a lot of health consciousness that is there. But otherwise, your status is measured by, when you grow up in status, you need to have more servants to do your job, and you stop doing your job. If there's a water here also, you'll press the bell and ask him to bring the water. Why? Your body will not move. Swamiji says when the telephone bell rings, all of the people in the house must run to pick up the call immediately. Ah, he will take and they will take. No, you must bring into action by yourself. When the doorbell rings, that must be the case. Otherwise, your servants will be very fit and energetic, not you. You cannot even then climb steps there. It is not again to have six packs abdomen and have be a Mr. or Miss Universe. No. What can be the definition of a good energetic and healthy body? If you are see, right now you are sitting and listening, maybe. Do you think of your heart? No. Why don't you think of the heart? Because heart is functioning well. Do you think of your kidney? No. Because kidney is functioning well. On the other hand, if there is a pain in the back, that back pain will draw your attention. So you are drawn to that part of the body which is having pain, which is not all right. So a perfect body is when you forget the body. It is not to be measured in terms of what is your height, weight, and body mass index and other thing. If you are able to forget the body, means the body is kept in optimum condition. As simple as that. Practically, you must be able to do whatever your jobs are by yourself without the support of others. When you go to the airport or railway station, you must be able to handle your luggage. 2, 3 stairs in your building, if you walk up, you must not pant. That sort of a thing. People stop driving cars when they have. You can have your driver for comfort if you want to park or if you want to use them sometimes. But why should you stop driving? You must never stop action. So the body must be kept in constant action all the time. Next, how does the mind generates energy? The mind generates energy by surrendering to an ideal or a cause. Higher the ideal, greater is the energy that is generated. Imagine if there is a union leader who is negotiating with the management of the company for the bonus of all the workers. Puja is coming and the company has not declared bonus. He goes to the managing director's room, doesn't even wait for an appointment. Even if the secretary says that he's busy or something, he can bang open the door and he sits there and he says, "Sir, please negotiate now." There's so much force and energy in his action. If the same union leader wants to get a job for his brother-in-law in the company and he approaches the same managing director's room, there will not be force in his action. He will hesitate. His words will not come out powerfully. He'll be stammering. He will not even enter the room with that. There will be some sort of hesitation. In the first case, there is a lot of energy. In the second case, there is no energy. Why? Because in the first case, he is representing the cause of the union. His mind is surrendered to an ideal which is a bigger cause than his personal motive. In the second case, there is a selfish interest. The moment I work for myself and the moment it is in a small circle, only to that extent I will have energy. But the moment I surrender to a cause, here in the case of union, the union strength comes to him. That is why his action becomes more powerful. Mahatma Gandhi or some other political leader, a nation's leader, they say, leave your job and come and work for the nation. Their words have so much power and energy. Why? Because they have surrendered themselves to the cause of the nation. Once you surrender yourself to the cause of the nation, the power of the nation also comes to you. That is how it works. An ambassador of a nation has surrendered his personality to the nation. So when he makes a statement, it is India agrees or India disagrees. Who is India? This small person who's 5'8". No, he's not that 5'8" person. He represents the nation because he has surrendered his personality to the nation. He cannot have a personal opinion which is different from that of a nation. He cannot say my government decides like this, but I don't agree with it. He will be called back immediately. Ambassador is one who has completely surrendered and representative of the nation, so he gathers so much power in his actions and words. Like that it is. Haven't you seen sometimes a small bird like a sparrow, which is usually afraid of big birds like crow and kite, when it has laid eggs and the young ones have come out, if a crow comes to vicinity, it will fight with crow and chase the bird away. Why does that, how does that sparrow gain that energy at that point of time? The sparrow does not think itself as a small bird, it is a big mother actually. That is the power that it has the moment you are able to position yourself with reference to a higher ideal. So that if you surrender to your mind, to your higher ideal, you automatically gather energy. And the third is intellect. Intellect role is to fix a goal and direct all the actions to the chosen goal. This is called as consistency. We talked about the 3C success. This is consistency. Consistency is a trait that Indians need to learn more from even the Westerners, relatively, I'm saying. Consistency is to keep at the action again and again and again till you achieve it. Directing all the actions to that same purpose or the same goal is consistency. You finish it till the end, you go and achieve it. That is consistency. You can be an average person in any field, it does not matter. But if you are at it again and again and again, you are sure to achieve some degree of success in your field. One day you are here, one day you are there, that will not work. See, think about a water that is flowing everywhere. Probably does not create so much energy or power. But you try to focus the flow of the water in one direction, tremendous energy it creates. It creates hydroelectric power. Wind blowing in all directions, it does not give power. When wind is made to blow in particular direction, it generates electricity, power. Sunlight, when it is scattered everywhere, not much power. When you focus the sunlight, let's say you use a lens and let the focus fall on a paper, it will burn. Your skin, it will burn. How does it that it gains power? Because all the rays of sunlight is focused to that point. Now the question is, are all your actions focused to a particular ideal or a goal? No. One action here, one action there. Then how are we to achieve success? I think David Attenborough, brother of Richard Attenborough, he is the one who is famous for the documentaries on nature, Mother Earth, planet, all these things in BBC. He positions himself in a Philippines forest to get the shot of an eagle, which comes out only during monsoon there. And in the monsoon also, the cloud is not very clear. You cannot get a clear picture also. It is said that he waited for 20 monsoons. Every year he will go in the monsoon, wait for that. Finally, after 20 years, he got a good video of the eagle there. This is consistency. Till you achieve that, you do not leave it. You go. See, from 1980s, 90s, and now even in early 2000, you see the performance of Indian team in hockey and even in cricket. Sometimes we'll be leading the match by 5-1, that type of a goal margin. Last 5 minutes, what happens, we do not know. Then we either lose the match or draw the match. Something that has to be won many times. Many times. It is, I'm remembering 1988 semi-final of the Seoul Olympics, where it was in our hands to qualify for the semi-finals, and we were just a minute away, where then we lost in the last minute. Like that it is. How many times we have taken 7 wickets, 8 wickets of the opposition, and the last 2 wickets we are not able to complete. And that is where consistency is there. Now, of course, it is all improved, and in every sport we are showing that improvement. The point is this, that you must have that consistency to go till the end and finish it. Are all your actions directed towards the same thing? If that focus is there, then you will achieve something in that. Pat Cash won Wimbledon in 1987 after long an Australian had won. Maybe Newcomb or somebody won in 73. After that, it was all dominated by the Swedes and Americans. John Bogue and McEnroe and Connors, they were dominating. Till in 1987, Pat Cash won. And in the interview, he said what all he did for 1 year with this goal of Wimbledon in mind and work. It is just not the net practice and match practice of the tennis. What time he got up, how much jogging he did, what are the other activities he did. He avoided party, let us say, after certain hours. He avoided alcohol, something like that. So what has alcohol got directly to do with tennis? What has jogging got to do with tennis? But The point is all other actions are also directed in such a way that you are able to achieve this goal. This is called consistency. Otherwise, we are very great in initiating various projects, but it will stop halfway. That's all. The flyover will be fast. They will initiate quickly, construct, and it will come up to this level and stop. For 10 years, it will be like this. It will never get finished. And then how are we going to be a successful nation? It is just not possible. So that consistency is the capacity to go till the end and finish it. Intellect must be there to direct all the actions till you finish it. That is that dhriti, that consistency that you have to go there and finish it. That valor, that power must be there. Come what may, that I'll go and finish it. This is the discipline of the intellect. And also, in a way, subtle intellect also makes you remember that you are just an instrument doing that action. There's a supreme power which is making you doing that action. So you become objective in action. Okay. So you generate energy through body, mind, and intellect. Then how do you avoid dissipation of energy? Dissipation of energy happens through only one means, that is your mind. It is a myth to say that you lose your energy or you become tired because of bodily actions. Wrong. It is the mind that makes you feel tired. Aging also is a myth. If you feel you are aged when you are 30, you are an old man. You can be 80 and you can feel young. How you feel at mind, really, that matters, and that gives energy. A person is working in the office, a young person, 35 years, let us say, he is in a high position. He may be a managing director also of his company. He is sitting there signing some papers, holding meetings, and doing some things in the office from morning till evening. He comes back home and he feels extremely tired. He has a small child who is 2 years, which has been running around all over the place throughout the day. And at the end of the day, it is ready for more play. And he's saying, Papa, come, let us play. The man says, no, beta, I am very tired. Actually, he is tired. But think of it. You are 20 times stronger than the child. Isn't it? If the child can lift 1 kilogram, you can lift 20 kilograms. That is your strength. If the child can walk so much distance, you can walk 20 times that distance. So much strength you have, yet you feel tired. The child doesn't feel tired. Why? You will find that naturally the child does not have any past worries or future anxieties. Child by itself lives in the present. It has so much energy. But all the time you can be doing any action, but the mind is caught up in the past worry and future anxiety. You lose all your energy. You are said to be then not concentrating in the work. And here comes concentration. What is concentration? We use this term very liberally. You tell your child also, concentrate and study. You tell your subordinate, concentrate and do the work. They don't turn back and ask, what is concentration? You'll say, never mind, concentration. Or you will give some other term, focus, something like, what is focus? We are not looking for a scholastic education. What should concentrate? What is concentration? If I am doing this action of talking here, my body is here, but is my mind backing the action? That is called concentration. If you are cooking in the kitchen, when your body is engaged in the action there, is your mind also in the kitchen? Then you are concentrating in kitchen. If you are driving a car, your body is sitting, but is the mind also there in the road while you are driving? Then it is concentration. So concentration is to keep the mind in the present chosen activity. But the mind will not be in the present by itself. That is the nature of the mind. Mind has to go into the past, mind has to go into the future. To not allow the mind to go into the past and future and keep it into the present, you need a powerful intellect. So the definition of concentration is to keep the mind aloft in the chosen action by not allowing it to go into the past or the future, and keeping it on the present action with the help of the intellect is concentration. I repeat, intellect keeping the mind on the present chosen activity is concentration. Why I say present chosen activity is, mind may like to go in a field where it likes. A boy may be infatuated with a girl and constantly his mind is thinking of the girl. That is not said to be concentration. It is you tell the mind this must be done and there it must be done. You say for the same boy you give a passage to write, he may make 10 mistakes out of it. There's no concentration. A letter that should be finished in 10 minutes might take even half an hour or 1 hour. Why? There's no concentration. There is no focus. The mind goes here and there. The mind has to be pulled and brought back into that unit action that this must be completed now. Better be focused here. What can do that? Your intellect can do that. When the mind is constantly but worried about the past and future, it will not be able to focus on what it is to be done in the present. And if the present action gets distorted like this, how will it result in proper result and success in the future? Not possible. The same Wimbledon example you take, 1987, the other losing finalist was Ivan Lendl. He was a great champion. Ivan Lendl won all the tournaments very easily. He could not win only Wimbledon. And people attribute all other causes other than the real cause for his loss. See, they talk about grass court and clay court and hard court. He can win in clay court and hard court, but grass court is difficult. Understandably, okay, grass court may not be his favorite surface. That is possible. But on the grass court in Wimbledon, 2 times he reaches the finals, beating all great players. He reaches the finals. 86, he loses to Boris Becker, who has not yet reached his peak. 87, he loses to Pat Cash, who was much lower ranked than him. How do you account for that? It is not grass court or clay court. It is that his obsession with winning Wimbledon. From February onwards, he will make the statement, this year I'll win, this year I'll win, this year I'll win. Like that, he is extremely obsessed with the trophy. So while he is on the court, he is thinking of the future cup. And he is bogged by the past worries, past failures. So how can he concentrate and play instead of the ball? If you see the cup, where is your game then? Very many batsmen come and play cricket up to 90, they play very fluently. In 90s, what happens? The commentator also says nervous 90s. Why is he nervous on 90s? Suddenly he thinks of the past failures. Suddenly he thinks of the future 100. He is not able to concentrate on the ball. Many times it is said Sunil Gavaskar knew that he has scored 100 only when the crowd clapped. So much he was focused on the game that he did not look at the scoreboard. That is concentration. So in each and every field, if your unit action is that your mind is completely backing that action, you are supposed to give 100% to that action only then. That is going to be automatically transformed into success. And what really prevents this is your mind. See, haven't you noticed sometimes you sleep on the bed, you're tossing here and there because of some worry, some anxiety. Your body is not moving. But morning when you get up, you're very tired. When your body has not moved, not got up from the bed, why do you feel tired? It's the mind's movement. So it is well sort of proven that the energy oozes out only through the mind. The mind has constant tendency to go into the past, constant tendency to be anxious about the results of the actions of the future, and therefore it is not able to do what it is supposed to do in the present. And in a small way, there is also feverish excitement in the present. Even assuming that a person does not have past worry or future anxiety, while doing the action, they do it with some excitement in the present. That excitement itself oozes out the energy. See, there are people who can constantly talk. They keep on talking. You cannot even stop their talking. But you give them a platform to talk to a big crowd or an audience, that time they fumble. It has nothing to do with maybe worries or anxieties. That looking at that big crowd and looking at the position of the stage and something, they get severely excited and they fumble with words. They do not know how to talk and what to talk. Why? It is feverish excitement in the present. So the 3 avenues by which energy is dissipated is worries of the past, anxiety of the future, and feverish excitement in the present. If you are able to arrest these 3 movements of the mind and keep the mind in the present chosen activity, you are said to be concentrating. When you have concentration and consistency, success is guaranteed in any field. In any field. Just to summarize, concentration is when intellect directs the mind to the chosen action. Unit activity. So in every unit activity, there has to be concentration. And then with a group of activities, all the actions being directed towards a particular goal, that is called as consistency. Intellect directs all the actions to the chosen ideal. A good example here is again to remember Sachin Tendulkar and Vinod Kambli. Vinod Kambli was as talented as Tendulkar, a great batsman. But why he could not achieve the greatness as Tendulkar? Tendulkar used to be the nets and he was living and breathing cricket all the time. Calmly, one day he used to play cricket, another day he's in a TV show, next day he's shooting for an advertisement, next day he's in politics, he's doing here and there. All the energies get dissipated in various channels. So you must channelize all the energy in the same direction towards that particular goal. You will achieve something or the other. See, the talent is different. But even if my talent is not at national level, if I can play only at Ranji level, if I can only at the Pada level, club level cricket, it does not matter. I will be able to achieve optimum success in wherever I am if I am able to direct all my actions to that particular goal there. That is called as consistency. So we have covered these two C's of success, and this is actually enough for success. The third C of success, which is cooperation, if we add an element to that, the success becomes complete. There is a spiritual quotient of that success, which is not the scope of today's talk. But what is interesting is this blueprint of right action is given in one verse in Bhagavad Gita. All the 6 points that we discussed now, 3 points with reference to generating energy, and 3 points with reference to avoid dissipation of energy, is in chapter 3, verse 30, backbone of Karma Yoga. Mai sarvani karmani sanyasyat adhyatma chetasa nirashir nirmamo bhutva yudhyasva vigada jwaraha. Renouncing all actions in me with thoughts resting on the self, free from hope and attachment, fight without mental fever. Renouncing all actions in me refers to the surrender. With thoughts resting on the self, mind fixated, the intellect fixates the mind in the ideal, consistency. Free from hope and attachment, hope of the future, attachment of the past. Fight, do the bodily actions in the fighting spirit, without mental fever, no feverish excitement in the present. Such is the power of this verse. It is like an atom bomb packed in it. Thank you. More promotion. You are muted. You are muted.
Yeah, thank you, Ramaswamiji, for that wonderful presentation. Viewers, if you have any question, please post them in Q&A box. Ramaswamiji will be taking up those questions now. We have a couple of questions. First one, to quote Swami Chinmayananda, you said you have to aim for Mount Everest rather than a small hill. But isn't it more practical to have a realistic goal depending on your own capabilities?
Correct, Geeta. That our aim, we must have realistic ideals, no doubt about it. But see, the vision or an ideal is also what top-down approach, in the sense that you always have in mind, first learn about Mount Everest and finally achieving that is the ultimate aim must be there in the back of the mind. At present, I may not be able to I may not be in a position to climb Mount Everest directly. So I need to first practice with the small mount, which is near my house also. And even in Himalayas, I need to maybe conquer various peaks. But at every point of time, I must not sit complacent that I have achieved something. Yes, no doubt at one point of time, you will feel happy when the results come to you. Enjoy that success. But we must never get into the complacent mode that this is all end of it. You have to always keep that thought of Mount Everest. Here is as an example that you are saying, that ultimate perfection is that I need to achieve, and not rest content till you reach it. That will keep you motivated and inspired to do all the activities in life and not get just stagnated at any level.
Correct. Thank you.
Yeah.
Moving on, how do we identify our ideal? How do we know that we are good at?
Okay.
How do we know what we are good at?
What we are good at, you are referring to what is known as technically as Swadharma. So each and every one of us is blessed with some talent. You can say as it is God given, but it is the God given in the sense it is the result of all the past karmas that you have done, that the energies of which is deposited within you. And it will automatically manifest itself even from early childhood, as it were. The duty of the teacher and the parents is to give a liberal sort of environment and atmosphere for the child and spot this actually, what it is naturally able to do it. For some, it could be singing. For some, it could be mathematics. For some, it could be sports or governance or being a leader or cooking or whatever it. There's nothing that is inferior or superior here. And this is a important aspect that our education actually lacks. Our career are decided by what is guaranteeing us, let's say, a job opportunity or peer pressure, that if my friends go and do software, I must do it, or something like that. And even the teachers who are product of the same education system, whether they are able to guide the students properly, we do not know. So it is for you to observe your own childhood and take the help of your near and dear ones who are also wanting to help you. Not wanting to help you, that is good enough, because every parent wants to help the child, but they must have the intellect to guide the child also. That is, see, a parent can be a talented alcoholic. That doesn't make him a automatic guide of the child, right? He must have the intellect. He must have the thinking capacity. If not, you must lead yourself to a guru who can do that analysis for you by the data that you present. And there is a way by which you can find it out later in life also. You need to find out by writing your areas of interest from time to time early in the morning, and do it as an exercise for a couple of days, then set that papers aside, do that same exercise for few months later. See, for example, now you may write politics because election is coming, but maybe you are not interested in politics. Next World Cup may come, you may write cricket. But certain areas, without consulting each, will get repeated itself again and again, where you will feel comfortable irrespective of whether you make money or not. There are some people are very comfortable in doing accounts, let us say, but some people just cannot look at numbers, debit, credit, this, that. They feel fish out of water. For some, stock market means Bhagavad Gita and Upanishads is easy, but stock market is difficult, they will say. So, but for some, to see the bull, bear, watch the TV, looking at going down, moving investments, that comes very naturally for them. So there, where you feel comfortable, where you can spend long hours without feeling tired, where you get immersed, these are all the areas where your Swadharma probably is. And ideal is something that you get passionate about and you think beyond a common cause. That should get inspired. I cannot set your ideal, you cannot set my ideal. I have to find it. And that comes out of the inspiration when you are inspired by self-knowledge. So for the time being, I would say get immersed in the self-knowledge. Fortify and develop your intellect. A vision should emerge out of you. That is called as an ideal. That's a good.
Thank you. We'll go on. What happens if we have desires which drives us and we lose concentration?
That is precisely what will make you lose concentration. Yes, when you have set up a task to do something, it is your desire, which is when you break up the desire, you will find that what has happened in the past or what you are going to want in future, in either of these cases, it will go here and there. So you need a powerful intellect. There is no other way. It is not by wish, or it is not by some quick fix meditation and other things that is going to get fixed. In fact, I need to just say one word about it, because the whole world thinks that by doing meditation, they are going to improve concentration, which is not the case. Meditation is concentrated concentration. A person who is not able to really concentrate on a broad platform, he cannot do a single pointed concentration. Meditation per se is a powerful practice and its effects are huge and it's enormous. But who is qualified to meditate? If you are not even able to achieve general concentration, how can you achieve specific concentration? If I am not able to shoot the arrows on the big board, how am I to shoot it in the bullseye all the time? It's just not possible. So therefore, in fact, even in Advaita Academy that is published, there is a talk on meditation which elaborately talks about it. There are no quick fix remedies. Invest your time in developing the intellect step by step. A powerful intellect alone can control the mind by not allowing it to go here or there. Then you will be able to achieve concentration.
Thank you. Someone is asking to suggest a book for first-time parents who to help them strengthen their intellect.
Okay. The book that we recommend is one of the greatest contribution of our Swamiji, Swami Parthasarathy, I mean our Guru, is that he has brought down the messages of Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads down to the practical level for us to start from our level. So basically, first we need to understand there is a mind, there is an intellect, and what is the nature of the mind, how do we fortify the intellect. All this knowledge is derived from Vedas and Upanishads only, but it is written in a contemporary thought and language. So the first book I would recommend is The Fall of the Human Intellect, then The Holocaust of Attachment, and the Vedanta Treatise. This is good enough. I repeat again, The Fall of the Human Intellect, the Holocaust of Attachment. It talks about the mind's deadly nature of attachment. And then the Vedanta treatise is a comprehensive text, covers from A to Z of the entire Vedanta philosophy. Fall of Human Intellect and the other book prepares you for Vedanta treatise. Once you are done with this, then it will be easy when we relate to Bhagavad Gita and Upanishads like that.
And where can we buy this?
It is there available in the website of Vedanta World. 1 minute, I'll just put that in the chat so that it is benefit.
Yes, it will be beneficial for them.
It may be available in bookstores in various cities also, or with center representatives like us. But you can directly order it online from vedantaworld.org. I repeat again, vedantaworld.org.
Okay. Moving on, we will take a couple of questions and conclude the session. I want to work on I want to work anger-free manner at office, but I fail to do so daily. How can I overcome it?
In fact, yesterday was the topic on anger management, and obviously I did not have time to deal with the practical points about controlling of anger. But to put it in the context of the general formula, anger is a modification of your mind's desire only. And unless otherwise you have a powerful intellect, you cannot control the vagaries of the mind. So there must be strong focus and emphasis. Rather, I would say investing in yourself to allot time to develop the intellect. It is, see, the education in our schools, colleges, and universities, and what we gain from other sources like books also only develops our intelligence. That is one aspect of it. By intelligence, you can earn a living. Animals also have intelligence. If you are the peon in your company is not as intelligent as you, so he takes instructions from others and works. Okay, but you are intelligent in sales. Somebody is intelligent in accounts. Somebody is intelligent in computer. They do that work, but that does not guarantee a control of your life. In other words, standard of living is improved by intelligence. Standard of life is improved by intellect. Intellect has to be developed by you only, within you. Even a great guru or a master, they can give all the knowledge, but you need to work on that knowledge and develop. So to have control over your emotions, to make the right choices, and not only that, even to use the intelligence rightly at the right time, to have creativity in your work, all this requires original thinking. And that is the way that we can overcome. And then anger and other emotions can be done. But specific points about anger, I don't have time to go into details.
Okay, we will take up a final question. When we wake up, Sattva-guna manifests and have the energy to do sadhana. By midday, Rajoguna takes over, and finally, towards the end of the day, Tamoguna takes over, and it is at this time we make some forbidden activities. How can we overcome these mood swings? This is where a lot of us derail.
You're right that we cannot change this plan of nature. Why it is so, why we really do not know. But the plan of nature is that the entire world, including our thought pattern, everything is classified into broadly into these three gunas: sattva, rajas, and tamas. And 2 hours before sunrise, in general, is sattva of the sattvic time of the day. Sunrise to sunset is the rajasic time of the day, because sun activates everybody, and everybody's action is also initiated, as it were. Even the most lazy person will do some activity at that point of time. And after sundown, all the tamasic tendencies in us naturally come up. Now, our ancestors understood, and then they devised a lifestyle to go along with this. So they were successful, and they were able to achieve a lot because they were able to utilize the sattvic time much more. 2 hours of early morning and 2 hours of late night are not the same actually. Qualitatively, it's a vast differences there, though quantitatively both are 2 hours. So our lifestyle is now changed to such an extent that we don't see early morning at all. Most of us don't know what sunrise is, and our going to bed is very late. The prime time in TV itself is 11 o'clock, like that it is. After that, you eat and then you sleep. This is absolutely unhealthy, not just at the physical level, but at the mental level also. So essentially, if we understand what the purpose of human life is, and if we want to orient it towards achieving higher things, we have to mold our lifestyle in such a way. Even doctors now, when you go for treating any disease, they say most of the disease is lifestyle related disease. There was a lady who was a relative. Suddenly her fingers here became frozen and she could not move at all, and she was worried and went to doctor. Doctor said nothing. Go and start washing the utensils again. Everything will be all right. Like that it was. So whether it is various things. So then earlier the lifestyle was such that physical activity and other was combined, and they were able to get up early, go to bed early, and therefore what happens, even to beat the tamas, they had the dinner and they attended a satsang or something and went to bed early. Like that it was. But advent of television and various other things has changed our lifestyle so much. So you cannot alter this nature. This is the law of nature. Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas is not created by us. Okay, but they are there existent. We understand how they manifest. We align our lives accordingly. Therefore, your duty is to substitute wherever there is Tamas, you substitute with Rajas. And wherever there is Rajas, you give it a direction towards Sattva. And wherever Sattva is there, you promote it further towards transcendental, by which you will be able to fasten your evolution.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ramaswamiji, for these wonderful answers. Vivesh, in the evening at 6 o'clock, Ramaswamiji will be concluding the session. We have a final session in this series of talks. Please join us. If you have not registered, register in our website, Advaita Academy website. Thank you so much. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha.
No permission.